What's up, everyone? Before we get to today's show, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. This ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content like we have today. Our guest was on the forefront of bringing BJJ to the masses by importing martial arts videos, then producing instructional videos, and live streaming BJJ events. Jake McKee is one of the people that had the vision of what the sport was going to be and dedicated himself to promoting the art worldwide. Listen as Jake describes the early days of importing videos, the enormity of live streaming events back in the early days, and how his company, Budo Videos, blazed the trail for the BJJ video production that followed. He also shares with us his vast knowledge of yoga and how it has changed his life and how it complements his Jiu Jitsu. Here is the RŌL Radio with third-degree Aikido Black Belt, BJJ Black Belt under Carlos Gracie Jr., and the creator and owner of Budo Videos, Budo Jake McKee.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live. Gary, how are you, sir?
Yes, I'm fantastic.
You're smiling awfully a lot today.
It's funny. We do the takeaways, and I just finished the last one, the production on it. Mm-hmm. And man, I was cranky. I was grumpy, as you always say. It's terrible, but I'm in a much better mood today.
I'm glad that changed today because, we don't want to put up with cranky Gary.
No, he's no fun. That guy's he's a pain in the ass. But before we get started with today's show, therolradio.com, drop us a question, either a guest question or a question for us. If we read it on the air, you go into a hopper, and once a month, we pick a free Fuji gi. We used to do this with all the entries, anybody who took a survey, right? And there was hundreds of them. But now it's going to be narrowed down to 4 or 5, depending on the month. So your chance of winning is much, much greater. So go to therolradio.com and leave a question for us or a guest.
More importantly, you can ask us questions, and you can ask the guest a question, and get more engaged with the show, more a little more involved, if you will. But some of those questions are quite interesting, aren't they? I mean, they keep flowing in, so it's always
variety
good
of topics. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Should we get to the show?
I think we should.
One and only Budo Jake. How are you, sir?
Good morning, guys. Great to be here with you.
Good,
All right,
good
thanks for having us.
Good to see you. And I feel when we were scheduling this, and when I was thinking about this conversation, you're one of the unique individuals in Jiu-Jitsu community, I think, that is quite known. And it's not necessarily because of the Jiu-Jitsu itself, but because of the branding that you have established early on. I mean, I remember being, blue belt, white belt, and Budo Videos existed way back then. I mean, there has to be a sense of satisfaction that's associated with a huge footprint and huge impact that you've made on Jiu-Jitsu community.
Yeah, and I've been doing this for a long, couple decades now, and it didn't really hit me until when I was traveling. I think I was in Rio, and I had guys walk up to me on the street and say, "Hey, Jake, I love your show," and it happened in numerous cities that I would go to, and you think of jiu-jitsu as being this niche thing, but it became this worldwide phenomenon. And I guess I'm a little bit responsible for that. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of investment. But most importantly, it was a lot of fun.
Well, I do have to say you're very modest, because I think it's more than a little, but I'm glad that individuals like yourself really got involved in these things early on to really kind of create a path for everybody else later on. Because if we look at this 20 years ago, when all of this started, when you started Jiu-Jitsu, or even when you started Budo, the company, right? It was very narrow focus, but nobody else was doing it. Were you the only one back then at that time when Budo Videos started?
Yeah, when we started, believe it or not, we were selling VHS tapes.
Right.
DVDs, instructional DVDs were not a thing.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what VHS tapes are, it's not a disc. There's a tape inside.
Check your track.
Yeah, so we were one of the first companies to start making instructional DVDs. We're importing all these products from Japan as well. They were ahead of us in that market back then. We were the first company to do live streaming of jiu-jitsu events. We did the 2007 No-Gi Worlds, I think was the first event that we did. So yeah, lots of firsts in those regards.
Yeah. Do you think, what do you think would happen if you didn't do any of this? Like, what do you think today would look like?
I mean, I think somebody else would have stepped forward at some point. Live streaming back then was a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive. If I told you the size of the crew that we had to do some of these world events, 20 camera operators, they weren't just tripods on sticks or cameras on sticks with no operator. Like there was a cameraman behind each one, zooming. If you look back at those old events, there was a lot of love, a lot of money that went into producing those things. Technology has made that a lot easier right now. And in some cases, you see a cheaper product being put out, but it was definitely a lot more work to do those back then.
And I think you bring up a good point. I mean, it's today, media in general is so accessible on both ends, from a production side and then from a viewer side. It's so much more accessible. I mean, look at this. We like two jiu-jitsu dorks are sitting and talking to you, across the country right now, and it's not that difficult to really do this. I can imagine the complexity of the system and setup to produce something like this. And I'm not even talking about worlds where you're talking about 12 or 14 mats, right? Mm-hmm. There is significant financial investment that has to take place in order for these cameras to be there, pay people, and now stream this live. What year did you say that was?
2007 we did the first one, and there was not even equipment to do that stuff back then.
Did we actually have bandwidth to actually push this out live? We
had to purchase a lot of bandwidth. It was a totally different system back then, and we had to actually trademark our own system. We called it the multi-mat technology, a system to allow a bunch of camera inputs and to put different ones on screen. All those tools weren't around, and we had to create them. So we blazed a trail. It was a lot of work. And I'm glad to have been involved in it.
Who was the mastermind behind
my business partner? We call him Budo Dave. He was all the brains behind the technical side of that.
So let's talk about the Budo side. Where did this come from? Who came up with this idea? And I know this goes way back decades, but where did it all start?
So Budo is a name that means basically martial arts in Japanese. And I was living in Japan. That's where I got the idea to start the business. And when we started, as I mentioned, there was no products here to be made. So we were importing products from Japan. So it made sense to call it Budo Videos. I'm glad we didn't call it Budo VHS tapes, but called it Budo Videos. And of course, our product selection changed. And then we started creating our own content, got in with the Gracie Baja guys and IBJJF guys. And that led to making all the live streams. So the business morphed in many ways, but it was always around martial arts. And to this day, I'm known personally more in the Jiu-Jitsu community, but I have a wide knowledge and interest in martial arts in general.
What started? How was the first conversation between you and Dave to really get this off the ground? Are you guys sitting at a table and it's like, nobody else doing this, let's make millions on this? Or this was more of a conversation of, listen, we are just jiu-jitsu dorks and, we want to present this to somebody else?
The first memory I have is being in Japan and going to the bookstores there and seeing the huge selection of media, whether it was books or VHS tapes. And I was just blown away by all the stuff that you could get. And I would come back to America and find that you couldn't get any of that stuff, or very little. And so I said, you know what, let's start importing these products. And so that's how it all started. And then, jiu-jitsu started to get more popular. I started to get more into jiu-jitsu, and then it just snowballed from there.
Was this before you got into jiu-jitsu, or was this after? What was first for you?
I started the business before I got into jiu-jitsu. I've known of jiu-jitsu, of course, since I watched the first UFC live. Mm-hmm. That's probably my first exposure to it. But to be honest, back then, there was an attitude that I had and many others that jiu-jitsu was not gentlemanly, shall we say. The respectable way is to stand up and fight. And judo was respectable, but to get on the ground and roll with somebody, I really didn't want to do it. I respected it, and I knew it worked. He saw Carlos Gracie do it, but personally, it was naive on my part. I just wasn't interested in the beginning. But once I actually started training and met Carlos Gracie Jr. and met all these great guys, I thought, you know what? There is so much knowledge in here. It's not just brute strength. There's amazing technique. And I came to the later realization that, while jiu-jitsu was created in Japan, it was perfected in Brazil.
And this is do you think that view of yours came from the fact that you were involved in martial arts prior to jiu-jitsu? Because that's the case too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was always more interested in technique over size, and maybe more the philosophical side to things, as opposed to the brute force. And wrestling didn't appeal to me. It appeals to me now, but back then I just didn't have the appreciation for the more physical side of the training.
What do you think has changed? Right, this is such an interesting, change of dynamic and change of direction as far as jiu-jitsu as an art or as a sport or both. Even, 2 decades ago, you're not the only one. We have plenty of guests who say that literally the same thing. It's like, I'm doing the jiu-jitsu thing and nobody wants to do it. Everybody's laughing at me because they think, this is a joke, But then at some point this pivots and it becomes more marketable, it becomes more fun, and there is more draw. Clearly the community continues growing, and I look at it today. I mean, I don't know many places around the world where jiu-jitsu is not accessible in some capacity. At which point do you think that pivot point took place? What contributed to jiu-jitsu becoming so mainstream? Because that's what it is, right?
Yeah, I think it probably occurred sometime in the last 10 or 15 years. And if you look at any religion or field of study, there's many different branches of it. In jiu-jitsu now, you can look at it as a business. People can make decent salaries. Only a few people, but competing in big competitions that pay cash prizes. Back in the day, there wasn't much way to make a jiu-jitsu a business. Even the top guys, the world champions, still had other jobs. So the fact that it became a business for a lot of people meant that it would attract more people. The fact that you can treat it as a way to MMA, that appeals to some people. It doesn't appeal to everybody. Didn't appeal to me. I didn't want to get my head bashed in. Some people complain about it being a sport. I think that's great. I can understand why some people lament about the loss of the self-defense aspect, but you know what? Some people don't care about it. If you live in a super safe city and you want to get exercise, I think that's great. The more exercise, the better in shape people are. I think that's great. So there's just more avenues for people to go to, and I think that broadened the sport, and I think that's a good thing.
Do you think that similar pivot points took place in other martial arts, since you had exposure to other other arts? Period. Right? Do you think that this is a typical way of evolution, if you will, behind an activity or art like this?
I think so. If you look at Sambo, there's combat Sambo, freestyle Sambo, and sports Sambo? And wrestling has similar things like that. So yeah, I think it's a natural evolution.
Do you think jiu-jitsu will disappear?
Oh, absolutely not. No. I think if you take two cats and you put them together, they're not going to be doing kung fu. They're going to be doing grappling. It's something that comes so natural to people that. And I have traditional martial arts friends that don't like jiu-jitsu that ask me, like, what's the next thing that's going to come out? Like, dude, that time is over. There's not going to be another ninjutsu revolution. Those arts are great in their own respect, but as far as broad mass appeal, there's nothing that's going to be more widely accepted than grappling.
I was just going to ask, if we go back a little bit, what made you make the mental switch from traditional to jiu-jitsu? Like, maybe this is the next thing, or maybe I should get deeper into this.
I think it was just being around people that could explain it in shall we say, not a meathead way. There was MMA guys that I came across before that would, come onto the wrestling group, wrestling room, let's spar. And it's like, that didn't really appeal to me. But guys that could explain the finer details, like I said, I got involved with Gracie Baja early on, Carlos Gracie, Marcio Feitosa, all those guys taught in a way that was very accessible to me, and it just opened my mind. And certainly they're not the only guys. There was people doing that before them, many doing that after them. I just didn't get exposed to the depth of knowledge that jiu-jitsu had early on.
Are you saying there are meatheads on the mats?
and he said wrestling mats. I think he said wrestling mats.
But that actually creates an interesting, point of conversation. And we've spoke to many phenomenal instructors on this show, and but we kind of learning that not every jiu-jitsu practitioner is a good instructor, and you touch just on that right now, right? It's that ability to relay information, ability to attract people who have no idea what jiu-jitsu is. What do you think makes that let's just say, quote unquote, good instructor category?
Yeah, I'll say something about that some people might find surprising. I've trained with so many world champions and so many gyms across the world. And generally speaking, I find that the best instructors are not the world champions, even though the world champions are the best ones at doing it. The best instructors are the ones that weren't very good in the beginning, and they had to struggle to overcome maybe physical limitations, and they can explain the fine details to make it work for the average guy. The world champion, he's a guy that's, generally speaking, is very gifted physically. And when you ask him how he does something, he's like, I don't know, I just do it. And that's not a slight on them. It's just that they haven't had to figure it out to the detail that somebody that works a 9 to 5 and comes to the gym after work, like, they need to know the technical way to make that work. They don't have the physical gifts to make it work.
Do you think that there is a factor of taking things for granted by some of those guys? And what I mean by it is, we are so good at something that we just skip the details or the little minor fine steps, because it just becomes very automatic. It flows. And then when we have to relay that information to somebody else, now those details are just simply skipped because we do it automatically. Does that make sense? Do you think there's a factor behind teaching?
Absolutely. And also, we have to make a distinction between a full-time teacher and a full-time competitor. The competitor is generally a selfish person. They need to put all their time and effort into getting better. The professional teacher is the one who is more interested in their students' improvement over their own. And I came across one world champion, great guy, I love the guy, but he told me that whenever he teaches techniques, he teaches the technique, but he doesn't teach the counter. And I asked him why, and he said, well, I don't want my students beating me.
Oh, well, that's a very interesting. But as funny that sounds, I've heard many instructors actually say, I want my students to become better than me. Like, that's a point of satisfaction. Like, a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with my student, and they approached me and they says, like, I hope I'm going to tap you out one day. And my response was, I really do hope that you do. Like, that's a huge point of accomplishment for me as an instructor, to build you up to that point, to give you that skill set. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree with you completely. But I think the overused expression, leave your ego at the door, is often said, but rarely followed. And instructors often say that they want their students to be better than them. But in reality, you don't see a smile on the instructors' faces when they get tapped too often. There's still a lot of ego in the sport. I strive to also be happy when my students do better than me. And I'm open. I'm not competing actively anymore. So I'm happy to show them a technique, the counter to the counter, everything I know about it. And I think nowadays there's so much choices, whether you have an instructor or a virtual instructor. And if you have somebody that's holding back, that's not an instructor that I would want to support.
Well, but is there even a point of holding back? I mean, we can literally pick up a phone and I can find, and I'm not even joking about this, in my mind, I can find anything I want for free.
Yeah, but then you're just watching something. We've talked about this before. If you're not applying it, then what good is it? Right?
No, but I'm saying is, what I'm trying to say is that, is there a point of holding back something from a student? Is there a point of not showing something when they can literally go and find anything they want? Like, I'm not, do you see, what do you think about this, Jake?
I think the top guys in the world that are competing for tens of thousands of dollars are probably not showing everything that they're doing. Maybe after they retire, they will. But why would you want to give up that chance that's going to affect your income?
Well, yeah. I mean, that you're talking about the other side of the coin now. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they create a branding and they create, specific strategies that by showing to others, somebody could take advantage of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, those are good points. You've not only trained, but you also have seen, from a production perspective, many phenomenal instructors. What are some of the characteristics that you found they're just mind-blowing? Like this guy really can break this down so fundamentally that even, the most complex things become so simple.
Yeah, for sure. There's some people that have that attitude. Also, sorry to say, some people that have been doing this for decades are totally bored by it. I've seen some instructors that just go through the motions, and some instructors would rather do so many other things, but when their last name is tied to the sport, that's what they have to do. So not everybody shares the passion, but what I love to be around are the guys that are just as passionate now as they were back then. Jiu-jitsu is an ever-evolving sport. There's always something new to uncover. It doesn't stay the same, unlike other martial arts I've studied, where we're trying to do what somebody did 100 years ago. That's not the case with jiu-jitsu. So the guys that are always studying and researching and have that childlike awe of interest are the ones that I've been around, and they're still out there.
They're still out there. I hope that they stick around, because I mean, some of these pioneers, really, it's it is a pleasure to see them still in action, and some of them are, they're getting up there. We all have expiration date at some point, and I think it's anyway. I'm going to change topic because Gary's going to start crying. Listen, you talk about evolution of jiu-jitsu. You've been in business for many, many years, a couple decades at this point. What are some of those important things that you've noticed over the last 20 years, how jiu-jitsu has changed? The evolution is such a large word, heavy word, but yet it's continuous changing in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, there's a few things that I've seen change over the last couple of decades. One is that back then, the attitude was to get good at jiu-jitsu, you had to train in the gi. If you took off the gi, that was only because you had an MMA fight coming up. But otherwise, there's more to do in the gi than there is in no gi. So why would you want to limit your options? That was the attitude. I don't think that's the attitude anymore. It's not the attitude I ever had. I've always loved training both gi and no gi, and I think everybody should. But also, I think if you hate one or the other, then you shouldn't do it. At the end of the day, jiu-jitsu should be fun. Any pursuit should be fun. And the more fun you're having, the more you're going to want to do it. So I never get on people for not training one or the other if you don't want to. But back then, the emphasis was more on the gi. Another difference was leg locks. Leg locks were considered dirty. I always loved leg locks, and I wasn't getting them at my school. So I would drive up to LA and train with Gokor, and I was just blown away by the fact that he would teach heel hooks on day one, because I was always told they're so dangerous. And I think they are dangerous, but when you teach them from day one, students learn to have respect for them from day one. They're not caught off guard. So I enjoyed training with Gokor back then. I also trained with Eddie Bravo back then, because that was the place to get no gi back in the day. And probably the third big difference is the fact that back then you weren't allowed to train at any other gym. And that's still the case among some teachers, mostly Brazilian teachers. Not all, but some have that attitude. That's something that I never followed. I told my instructors, look, this is my business. I go around to other academies, I film it, I put it online. That's not going to change. And so it was never a problem for me, but I saw many other students get in trouble for training elsewhere. And I think, if you're giving a good product, you shouldn't give your students a hard time by going out to another place. If I have a student that goes to another place and learns something, I'm excited for him. I'm glad that he took the initiative to do that. And I want him to come back and share it with me and share it with everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about some important and let's be honest, a controversial topics here in jiu-jitsu, even to this day, leg locks being one of them, right? And often I remember these conversations with instructors and other students. It's like the leg locks are very dangerous, and that's why we don't do them, and this and that. There's a lot of risk associated with them. I'm curious what your thoughts on this. Do you think there's a higher risk when it comes to leg locks versus, let's just say, arm bars?
I do, and I can tell you I've injured probably a couple people with leg locks in training, a little bit more than with any other submission. But the reason was they didn't know what was going on. They didn't tap. They didn't respect the position. And I'm never one to crank anything, but I think that the real education needs to be on the students to know what danger they're in, knowing how to escape, which way to roll, knowing if you roll the other way, you're going to double the pressure. So I do think there is a danger in leg locks, but I think there's a way to teach them that is safe, and you can rip an armbar just like you can rip a leg lock. So anything can be dangerous. I think the attitude of the students, which comes from the top down generally, is paramount in that case.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with somebody about this, and they made an interesting observation, or an interesting comment, and they essentially said, listen, if we taught leg locks for the last 3 decades, and they were part of a curriculum, like nothing ever happened, but then we didn't teach arm bars, and then probably the view on the arm bars would be the same as this view on leg locks right now, because it's not that the submission is more dangerous per se is that we don't know how to react when we caught in it. And then often these unpredictable motions cause, panic, adrenaline rush, and all the other things. And then as a result of it, we move in unpredictable ways, and then there is an injury, right? That's considering that this is a safe environment and we're not viciously attacking each other. I mean, most of the gyms have friendly environments where we're trying to train, have fun, and improve our self-continuity jiu-jitsu education. So the vicious approach is not there. However, the accidents still happen. And he was making a point that mostly is because of we don't know how to defend, but even beyond that, we just don't know how to act or how to react in those positions. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I would also say a couple more points. One is that typically when an arm bar, if your arm's extended, you're feeling a little bit more pressure before the damage occurs. Whereas with the leg lock, I've gotten beginners into a position and they'll say, oh, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. I'm like, well, I'm not going to keep going until it does hurt, because once it hurts, then damage is done.
Yeah.
So sometimes people don't know how close they are to injury. And another thing is if you get your tendon snapped or strained, you're probably not coming to class tomorrow. You're not going to be walking well.
Right.
Whereas if you sprain your elbow, you can still, I don't know if you guys have ever held your belt with the injured arm and trained with just one arm. Like, you can still get by with a sprained elbow. With a sprained leg, you're probably not trained.
Yeah, I mean, most definitely, our legs are, very useful tool to the daily operations, and not only on the mat, but just, most of the students have normal professions and careers, and they do need to get to work.
Yeah, my first time ever submitted with one, I got a look from my training partner like, you should tap. And same thing, beginner, right? I was like, I don't feel anything. And he was just like, this is the time. And then after the round, he explained it all to me. So I just, if you're one of those guys that are doing them all the time, make sure your newbie training partner is aware of what's going to happen. That legs are in play, all that stuff.
What are some of the important points that you teach your students? And you've done seminars and you were involved quite a bit from the teaching perspective. What's some of the important points when you talk about leg locks? What do you emphasize as far as the risk and the reward, obviously?
Yeah, there's so many facets to that. But one thing I tell people is not to count on the submission and catch and release, they call it. Like, get the position, hold it, but understand that your partner might not know what to do in that position, and don't be so attached to the tap. If you're an upper belt and you get the position and you let it go, like, don't worry about it. Like, you won in your own mind, and nobody's giving medals for sparring sessions. So it's a big part of it is getting students in and out of the positions and not being attached to the tap.
But that's difficult to do.
It is difficult.
I mean,
to do.
that tap is so addictive, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. We're training to dominate each other, But if you hurt a student, he's not coming back tomorrow. That really affects morale in the gym, and I think that has to come from the top down. This teacher has to always emphasize that, and I see that in gyms. Some I go to, and it's like, oh man, these guys are out to kill each other. I go to others, and it's more of a flowing atmosphere, and it's always who the teacher is that impacts that attitude.
Why do you think it's such a? Why are we so hungry for submissions?
I mean, that's the name of the game, right? Jiu-jitsu is all about dominating another person. And I think that can attract people that want to dominate other people, and which is fine in the gym. But, outside of the gym, I don't want anybody trying to dominate me, in a conversation or in a relationship or anyway. So unfortunately, sometimes it's just attracting the wrong people. And I think the teacher can affect the students' attitudes in that regard. But for some students, it's going to be a longer road than others.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part, or that's the reality kind of surrounding all of it, right? We often talk about jiu-jitsu being a marathon, not a sprint, but yet today, in today's world particularly, when everything is so accessible in our phones and just instantly, sometimes that's very difficult pill to swallow, where, I can't have it right now. It takes time. Have you found that being a big obstacle for the students?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree that it should be considered a marathon. I mean, unless you're, some people have the goal of being a world champion in 5 years or something. So they're going to be on a faster track. But I've always looked at longevity as being the key. I want to be training when I'm 70 years old. It's already been 34 years in the martial arts, and I'm stronger than ever before. And I want to keep getting stronger and not getting injured. And back when I was training every day and competing, I was getting injured a lot. And I'd have to go to a chiropractor once a week and massage once or twice a month. And there was so much maintenance going on. And that's what led me to really commit to yoga. And once I committed to a regular yoga practice, it's like I discovered I didn't need to go to a chiropractor. I didn't need massage. Like I was able to take care of myself. A lot of people tell me that yoga is boring, and I agree. But the benefits of it are incredible for the serious athlete.
And we'll touch on the yoga in a moment because I'm really curious about this, right? There's a correlation. For a lot of people actually talk about that between the recovery and the longevity and yoga within jiu-jitsu. But I'm curious, before we get there, do you think that the training methods 10, 15, 20 years ago created more wear and tear on our bodies than we have today?
Yeah, I would say so. There was probably more emphasis on the fight aspect than the sport aspect. And just with the knowledge of more techniques that are out there, it's a little less of butting heads. But overall, I think that there was just an attitude in the past that jiu-jitsu is all about fighting. And now I see more people treating it as a sport, more people having fun with it. And also knowing the risk of injury. If you're a working professional, like you don't want to go on the mat and get all scraped up and bruised. And some people are into that, and that's great, but not everybody is. And there's a lot more places for those people who aren't into the fight aspect of it to train.
Well, I think the beautiful part behind this continuously building community and jiu-jitsu evolving and growing is that there's jiu-jitsu for everybody. And what I mean by this is that we have the competition gyms who focus on fighting and competition and really drive that competitive aspect of it. But then we have self-defense academies, which are a little bit more, on the art itself. We have academies for kids only. We have academies for the older guys. We have classes for whatever, 50, 60, 70 and up. Like these good different opportunities are being created. Why are you laughing?
Because I fit a lot of those categories.
These different opportunities are being created by instructors in different academies to really cater specifically towards those groups, allowing them to train jiu-jitsu without having that wear and tear of the grind of fighting, which what you talk about, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think it's great to have all those outlets. But one thing that kind of bugs me about the word jiu-jitsu for everyone is that I think there should be an outlet for everybody. But if you're one of these guys that treats jiu-jitsu like MMA and you're in an academy for let's say older guys, that's not a good fit. And whenever I've taught classes, if there's been a student that was hurting people or just training with the wrong attitude, I would give them a chance. I would discuss it with them. But after 2 or 3 different infractions, shall we say, I would recommend that they go elsewhere. And sometimes when you're treating it like a business, some instructors never tell a student to leave, and that's a case of a bad apple really ruining a bunch. So I like being able to cultivate a good atmosphere in my gyms, and if someone's not fitting it, they should go somewhere else.
But that has to be a hard conversation for instructors, especially if they are a business owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is you're essentially saying, well, listen, I don't want your money, and because you're not fitting in, that could be a big conflict for some.
Yeah, it can, but by not kicking that person out, if they're not going to change, you give them a chance to change. But say there's one guy that's just hurting people, and you have 10 students in the class, and you have 10 rolling sessions. Well, now that one guy has 10 opportunities to hurt people, and he's giving 10 bad experiences with each student. So I think in the long run, you're going to lose more students by keeping the bad one.
Well, but there's also the other side of the story. The student who is very dynamic and who is very driven from the physical perspective, they are not progressing either. If they find themselves in a position where this is not an environment for them to maximize what they are trying to achieve, they won't succeed, right? So there's
right.
more than one reason why not every academy fits every student. You really have to do some homework. You have to think about what you want out of jiu-jitsu, and finding a good fit, I think, is very critical to your success, right?
Absolutely. And when I mentioned kicking somebody out, it's not done in a mean way. It's done in like a care for the person. It's like, look, let's say a super aggressive person. Like you got a lot of energy. You're going to succeed at this, but this is not, the group that is going to help you with that. And there's another gym across the street. They love MMA, whatever the case. So yeah, there's a place for every.
Frozen. Let's see what happens here. Hopefully it'll only be a second. There we go.
We came back.
We lost you for just a second.
Okay. Come back with one last sentence.
Oh yeah. So I was saying that, if you're a super aggressive guy, then you definitely I would tell him you definitely have potential, but it's not done in a mean way. It's suggesting that you find a place that suits his needs better. And while I agree that there should be a place for everyone, not everybody has the right to train at every place. If you're a aggressive guy, you should be with the aggressive guys.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, it's, a cohesive, strong, and united team is very important. Whatever that means individually within that group.
Exactly.
That's what really going to set them for success. Let's talk about the yoga.
Yes,
because I know there's a huge passion of yours. How did it all start?
I'd been doing yoga off and on for 15 years or so. But like I said, it wasn't until I kept getting injured through training and kept having to rely on other people that to fix me, chiropractors and masseuses, that I realized I want to be able to take care of myself. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to commit to a daily yoga practice every day for 1 year. And after 1 year, if I don't like it, I'll give myself the opportunity to quit at that time, but not before. And like I said, I didn't always find it fun, but the benefits were incredible. I found myself more flexible in body and mind, and didn't have to go to chiropractors or masseuses ever again. And I've still kept it up since that year. I've tried every type of yoga there is, pretty much. And while I like solitary yoga, and I do that, I also enjoy acro yoga, which is lifting up other people with your arms and legs. And I've found that that's a great complement to jiu-jitsu. It helps develop strength, helps develop stability muscles, the side-to-side motion, which is great for jiu-jitsu. And, to be honest, in jiu-jitsu, we're around 95% guys, which is great. But it's nice to work out with women as well, and acro yoga has a lot of women in it. So it's just fun operating with the other sex. And
so
I've done live.
For those who are listening right now and they are like, Jake, you're out of your mind. Yoga is like the most boring thing in the world. Break it down for us. What is so beneficial about yoga that you found, for yourself?
Yeah, there's benefits of strength and also flexibility. If you you could say, well, I could just go to the gym and lift weights. That's true, but then you're not working on flexibility. And generally, they work in opposite directions. So if you work on a lot of strength, you're going to lose some flexibility. And if you're just working on flexibility, you might lose some strength. So a combination of the two is good. And yes, there's other ways to develop those things. You don't need to do yoga. You can do a number of different stretching routines. But yoga has a unique way of being a mind-body integration method that is different than just lifting weights and just stretching. And it's hard to put into words, but the more you do it, the more you realize that. Some people have talked about all kinds of emotional releases from yoga. A lot of people do come to yoga when they're going through some kind of crisis in their life. It has this amazing transformational potential. Not everybody needs it now, but you might need it at some point in your life. And particularly if you're going to be grappling for a long time, you have to consider longevity. I know guys that are much younger than me that, walk with a limp or, all these bad things from overtraining, and that can all be corrected through yoga.
So if one was to explore yoga and they are involved in jiu-jitsu, what would you recommend a correct but yet engaging part about yoga? And before you answer that, I think what is interesting about this, that when we are in jiu-jitsu, we are most of the time very dynamic. We move around. We trying to problem solve. Our brain is on a high stimulation mode. We really troubleshooting continuously while we're trying to achieve whatever the goals are. Yoga appears, to me at least, complete opposite of this, where there is no troubleshooting. Well, maybe there is. I don't know. There's definitely less dynamic. Well, I don't know. Maybe there is a dynamic. Tell me about this.
Yeah, there's so many different kinds of yoga.
Right.
Vinyasa is probably one of the most common types. It's just a flowing type of yoga. And there is a lot of movement. You don't hold positions for a long time. There's a lot of arm balances where you're putting your hands on the ground and lifting your feet up. So you will definitely be challenged a lot in yoga. In a way that's different than jiu-jitsu, for sure. But some of the positions can be very difficult and very taxing, and you'll want to move and you're not allowed to move. You have to stay in the position. So there's a lot of benefits, but another type of yoga is yin yoga. And if you're tired from doing jiu-jitsu and you want something a little more relaxing, yin is a type of yoga where in an hour class, you might do 10 moves. You'll hold each move for 3 to 5 minutes. You might have your legs up the wall. You'll use a lot of different props, and you really get deep into the poses. And that is a great and a really accessible way to explore your flexibility.
And it seems like it would be a great opportunity to really disconnect and really focus on yourself and center your thoughts and ability to kind of isolate yourself and really reflect and, internally. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely. And, just like jiu-jitsu, different yoga teachers have different methods, different music playlists, but if you find a teacher that has music that you like, that makes it a lot more fun. For guys that are doing jiu-jitsu all day, going to a yoga studio, you're going to be around more women. And I'm not saying that from a sexual point of view. It's just cool to be around feminine energy. And anybody that's looking to add a little yoga, I would say, don't just do it once. You probably hate it. Do it for a week and see how you feel. And preferably do it in the morning. You're going to feel so good all day long from that practice.
I have a question about it. So you talked about maintenance with the chiropractor and massage. And then it seems like yoga is more preventative. But if you are having a minor injury, something that's really bothering you, should you still do it? Should you keep up with it or take a break from it like you would stepping off the mats?
I still go to a chiropractor when I need to. I think they are amazing. There are definitely some chiropractors that say they can cure all kinds of diseases. I don't go to that extreme, but as far as skeletal manipulation,
we recently had a chiropractor on this.
Yeah, that's fun. But I'm actually talking about yoga. So if you are on the mats, you get an injury or from whatever else you're doing, should you take a break from yoga like you would take a break from the mats? Can it be maintenance as well?
And I would say there's very infrequent times I've taken a break from yoga. If I have a sprain, say you have a knee injury, doing some standing tree pose where you're only on one foot, that's going to put a little more pressure on the knee. I think you just have to ask yourself, can I put a knee brace on or some tape? Am I going to be okay? You can always adapt the practice, even though the teacher's telling you to do this and to do that. If you're injured, the teacher will totally understand if you're doing things at your own pace or not doing certain poses.
Let's talk. Let's get this a little bit deeper, right? So I'm sure there will be a lot of questions generated after this conversation: yoga versus jiu-jitsu, or yoga for jiu-jitsu, or vice versa, whatever the case is. How does one find a yoga studio that's fitting? Is that similar process to what jiu-jitsu would be, where the chemistry really matters, instructors, playlists you talked about, a style of yoga or type of the yoga? How do we select all this? It seems like a lot of information when we're trying to engage.
Yeah, there's definitely more variability in the quality and style of yoga classes than there are in jiu-jitsu. But just like jiu-jitsu, I think the answer is to go to the yoga studio, definitely the one that's closest to you first, and see how it feels. If they're treating it like a cult and or talking about chakras and moon positions, that might appeal to you. It doesn't really appeal to me. It just all depends on what kind of teacher you vibe with. And a lot of the yoga studios have free week trials. So I think that's the best approach.
How long you've been practicing yoga?
14 years.
So
and,
almost not almost as long, but I mean, yeah, close, right? Because jiu-jitsu has been 20 plus, right? So. Yeah.
And I did my yoga teacher's training a couple of years ago, and last year entered in a competition and won the gold medal in the Yoga Olympic World Championships too.
Oh, nice. Well, there we go. I did not know that. Congratulations. That's phenomenal. How was that experience for you?
That was great. It's held every year in Turkey, and during the lockdown, they didn't have travel, of course, so we did it online. So they said, film a routine and send it in, and there was 1,500 entries. And my girlfriend and I won the gold. So
Well,
we're very happy about that.
Tell us a little bit about this, because I've never heard of this. I didn't know there was a yoga competition. So please forgive my ignorance here. But it's how is this done? What are you judged on? Is it does everybody perform the same thing? Do you create? Is there a quality that you're being scored on? How does this work? Explain to us.
Yeah, there's a few different categories. There's solitary yoga, and there's what I specialize in is partner yoga or acrobatic yoga. And so the one I entered was with two of us, and basically it's a routine that I made up by combining different poses, and it's judged on. There's a whole list of criteria, but calibration between the parties and originality and difficulty. It is subjective, but they compare all the videos together and make their judgments. There's also children's divisions, adult divisions, yoga, dance. There's quite a few different categories.
That's phenomenal. Are you planning on continuing this yoga competition, or was a one-time try?
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm not really focused on the competition aspect. It was great to do. It was a fun experience, and I'm always creating new flows, so it wouldn't be difficult for us to do it. So I might do it again. Yeah.
It sounds like you had fun. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely.
So how is let's switch back to the jiu-jitsu part. You don't have your own academy.
That's right. So many people have asked me why I don't, and the basic answer to that is, I already have a business. We got Budovideos. We have the Nogi Industries apparel line, and I'm also teaching acro yoga and also jiu-jitsu workshops here and there. So I really never appealed to me to have a nighttime job. I love training jiu-jitsu in the evenings. I love not going to the gym if I don't want to go. I just didn't really feel the need to start another business. That being said, I do love teaching. And I do teach workshops and seminars here and there. A couple weeks ago, I was at the Grapplers Retreat in Mendocino, California, for a week-long retreat, teaching along with my friend Brent Berniston. And so that's really the way I prefer to go. Go to different places to teach.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be refreshing. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, where you're not committed to one mat, one area, one dynamic, but you can really visit and explore, make friends, and still share your interpretation of the art.
That's right. I have friends all over the world, and there's never a question of can I go to this academy or can I not? I generally know somebody every place I go, and I'm welcome. And I enjoy having my evenings free to do that. And if I had my own academy, maybe this other academy across the street wouldn't want me to go and stuff like that.
Yeah, there are those dynamics.
What scene right now do you think is like the burgeoning one? What's the most exciting that you've been to recently where you think things are really changing or happening?
Are you referring to gyms or? Yeah,
academies where you've been recently, or certain areas where there's multiple places you've trained where you're like, man, this is this scene, something's happening here that's going to change stuff.
Yeah, pretty much every major metropolitan city, people are training hard and working hard. I think gone are the days where, if you want to get good, you have to train with so-and-so, or, if you're students of this world champion or that world champion. No, you can become a world champion training anywhere. All the resources are at your fingertips. And, Rafael Lovato Jr. got great being in the middle of Oklahoma. So I think there's just great guys everywhere. But to be honest, where I like to go is not necessarily a place to go and train super hard and treat it like a world championship match. I enjoy places with nice vibes, friendly people, and that's the kind of style I'm in right now.
So why do you think that people are so drawn to these big names? Why do we feel the need to purchase the world champion DVDs or whatever media on the subscription sites, or go to their seminars? And a little bit earlier in the conversation, we talked about not every champion. Matter of fact, you made a statement that a lot of the good competition guys are not good instructors, but yet we are so hungry for their information. Why do you think that is?
Well, they're the faces, they're the ones out there doing it. So I think it's natural to think if they're the ones doing it, then they're the ones I need to learn from. But if you look at it in terms of basketball, and excuse me, I don't have much experience with this, but who are the coaches of major basketball teams? Most people don't really know them. They know the players, but they don't know the coaches. But the coaches are ones that are actually doing the teaching, right? So I think sometimes we get attached too much with the face and not really the perhaps the people that are really out there teaching it in an intelligent way.
It's such an interesting dynamic, isn't it? I don't know.
So almost an hour already, which is pretty cool, but I don't know if we're going to wrap this up yet. I'm just wondering a little bit more about, as the start of your jiu-jitsu journey, which really seems to have taken off, you spent time, we didn't really touch on it too much, about Japan. And I'm wondering, people don't know, Aikido was very big for you. I don't know if you still keep up with it, but if you could touch on it a little bit and why it was so important to you.
Yeah, I don't really do Aikido anymore, but I was very involved with it for 15 years or so. And I love it. I don't love all Aikido. I think there's a lot of really bad Aikido out there. And it's not a fighting art. It hasn't kept up with the times. It's a classical art. And I think there's a lot you can learn about culture and body movement. There's a lot to benefit from. It gets a bad rap because people are looking at it from a modern fighting standpoint, which it's not part of it. That being said, there are some great movements, concept, philosophies, wrist locks that do translate very well. And in particular, there's a way I do a kimura that's that I haven't seen other people do, and it came straight from Aikido, and it's a huge improvement. And I don't understand why more people don't do it that way. To answer your question, I was involved in Aikido for a long time. Lived in Japan for 3 years and went back every year for about 10 years. Of course, I don't go back now because of Corona, but Japan's a great place. I think every serious jiu-jitsu instructor should strive to go to Brazil and go to Japan. Find the two countries that had the biggest impact historically on the art. I trained at a gym in Japan called Triforce. And the interesting thing about training in Japan is that you don't come across wrestlers, you come across judo guys. And they have incredible bases, great throws, of course. It's super fun training with those guys. But Japanese guys don't do much strength training, so they're not very strong, and they love technique. So I could often feel like I could power out of this move if I wanted to, but I would strive to make it as technical as possible. And you'll find great technique from Japanese guys because they're small and they're not, generally speaking, not the strongest. So great place to learn and train.
It creates
Go ahead. And I also made a 24-part series on my YouTube channel. It's actually on the Budo Jake YouTube channel. It was back in 2016 of training in Japan and going around. I visit the Kodokan in one episode. I go out to eat sushi in another episode. And in one of the last episodes, I'm teaching a class there. The owner of the gym was gone, and I get somebody come up and challenge me. He didn't take the class. He came from some other gym and was just watching me teach. And after class, he walked up and asked me if he could spar, which, that's a challenge. That's not a student. And that was an interesting experience. And you can see that on that video series.
Well, we'll post the link in the description so everybody can take a look at that. But did you find a big cultural change between Brazil, Japan, and the U.S.?
At the gym I was at, the instructor was a Japanese guy who trained in Brazil. So it was half Brazil, half Japan, I would say. Whereas in the U.S., at least the guys I was training with mostly were Brazilian. It's kind of hard to say. It's basically the same worldwide, in my opinion.
You think that jiu-jitsu is the same everywhere, no matter where we go?
Pretty much.
Do you speak English when you do these seminars overseas or in Japan?
Depends where I am. Back then, when I would teach in Japan, I would teach in Japanese.
There you go.
That's cool.
There you go. Well, interesting. It's so interesting to talk to you, Jake, because there's so many different dynamics that you've been involved in the last 2 decades. And that is like, forget about jiu-jitsu. I'm not even interested in the jiu-jitsu part. Between yoga and you traveling and exploring all these different cultures, it is so mind-blowing. But Gary's right. We've been at this for a while. What's ahead of you? You've done so much in the last 20, 30 years. What's ahead of you? What's your plan? What is Jake doing?
Yeah, like I say, I've been super active in acro yoga. I'll probably produce some instructional videos at some point on acro. I want to spread that even more. Still active teaching and training in Jiu Jitsu. I'm probably going to make a few instructional videos on Jiu Jitsu still. There's so much content out there, but I think I have a slightly different take that appeals to some people. The website Budo Videos is still cranking along. We've got a new app out that's on iOS and Android for instructional videos. So download that for free if you'd like. Nogi Industries is our gear line. We have a bunch of new apparel coming out later this year. So yeah, all those things just keep cranking along.
Do you think that because of the saturation of media that we have today between free and paid, do you think there isn't a point of making instructionals? Like, why do we keep pumping the same? Well, it's almost the same content. I don't know. Do you see a point of this, or at some point it's going to be so oversaturated that there will be no point of doing this?
Yeah, there's so much out there, that's for sure. I think there has to be another point to it. Are you going around teaching seminars? Well, if that's the case, then the content will help power those seminars. But there's so much of the same stuff being put out over and over again. So I think if you're going to put something out, it has to be something new and unique. And it should be taught in a way that's easy to understand. I've been to a lot of instructionals that are or seminars taught by non-English speakers are like, that's, that can be a strain to try to follow. So, but I think for good speakers, good teachers, there will always be a demand for good quality instructionals.
Well, that's good. Good to hear. There's hope. Gary, there's hope for you.
There's no hope.
There's hope for you, man. There's hope for you. Jake, before we wrap this up, we end of each episode, we have a couple questions, and one of them is from one of our listeners. If you don't mind, Gary will take a lead on this. We'll go through it. Some of the questions are funnier, some of them are more serious, but it always is interesting and to the episode and to the conversation.
Yeah, so for sure, let's talk about what it was like the first time you stepped on the jiu-jitsu mat. What was your experience? What were you feeling?
That? Yeah, first time I stepped on the mat, it was Marcio Feitosa was teaching at the Gracie Baja headquarters here in Orange County. And it was a very strenuous class. I think most new students of jiu-jitsu can attest to the fact that there's an adrenaline dump. And I saw guys walking outside and puking. I was thinking, what am I getting myself into? Luckily, I didn't puke. But it was just the beginning of an addiction. Of learning the secrets of how to overpower somebody bigger and stronger than myself.
I got to ask you, what in the world you guys were doing in that class that people are puking outside?
Oh, you have never come across that? I see it all the time.
No, but I'm like wondering, this is the first time you're stepping on the mat. I don't know. Like, what did the class look like?
It was just a regular class, but it was the sparring afterwards. The fight or flight response that people get.
Okay, I see.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I was going to save this listener question for later, but after what you just said, let's bring it in now. And it's Michael. It's from Michael, and he was wondering, let me get to this real quick.
Drums.
Yeah, I just got to find my page. I forgot to make a marker. What are your best tips for a smaller player?
For a smaller player, so many things. Number one, try to not let them put all their weight on you. Of course, that's always the idea, but knee shield half guard or spider guard, open guards are great ways to keep the opponent off of you. I like knee shield half guard because the opponent can put all their weight and he's not going to smash me. De La Hiva, like De La Hiva guard for the same reason. So find the guards that are going to keep you safe and not get injured. If your instructor's a big guy, like he might be teaching you moves that aren't necessarily going to be best for you. So search out smaller competitors and see how they deal with their opponents.
Sweet. Thank you. Have you ever wanted to quit?
I've never wanted to quit because things got hard or anything like that. Maybe, for political reasons or things like that. And, sometimes larger organizations, things happen that you're not happy with. So I have quit, affiliations and things like that. But as far as quitting the art, no, I've never. It's too beneficial to body and mind to quit.
Beautiful. Describe your feelings when you received your black belt.
My feelings of receiving every belt was that I didn't deserve it, but that feeling it made me want to train more. So, when I got my purple belt, I was thinking, oh, wait, I'm not a purple belt. Now I have to train super hard so I can deserve this belt that my teacher gave me. So it was actually a very motivational thing. Every single belt was. And at the end of the day, I have students asking me all the time, like, I don't feel like I'm ready for this. I don't feel like I'm ready for that. And I always tell them, it's not your choice. It's your instructor's choice. So don't worry about it. You'll get it when you get it. So I'd already had a black belt before, so maybe it wasn't as impactful as it was for other people. But for me, it's just recognition that I've been putting in my time, putting in my effort, and every gym is different. But in the gym that I was at, I was definitely holding my own and beating people above my level. And so I felt like in that context, I deserved it. So I was happy with it.
Why do you think? Let me spin off of this. Why do you think it's not uncommon for students to feel they don't deserve the belt at the promotion time? Why do you think? Why do you think that happens?
I just think. If you look at the corollary to that, the student who thinks that I deserved it long ago, like I don't really think that's the best attitude either. I think it's a sign of modesty, and you look around at other belts, especially black belt. You have guys like Buchecha that's a black belt, and you have Joe Blow down the street that's a black belt. There's such a wide variety, so I think it's easy to think that you don't deserve it. But at the end of the day, it's not your choice. So whatever.
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Gary, not your choice.
Oh, I know it's not my choice. I don't have a problem with that at all. Speaking of belts, the last question is, do you wash your belt?
I wash it, but not every time. I don't believe there's magical powers that get washed away. But yeah,
no, come on, Jake. Not even the yoga guy thinks there's magical powers in there.
Yeah, maybe once every couple months. I think I think we should wash our belts.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm a big proponent of it, even though I pretend not to be, just because it makes people angry. It's funny to watch people's reactions when I tell them I don't do it.
What a phenomenal conversation. We really do appreciate you being here, taking a little bit of your day and sharing your journey, sharing some of the thoughts and some of the philosophies, honestly, because there was a lot of golden nuggets, little here or there of what you've done in 30 plus years of martial arts and 20 some years of jiu-jitsu and then yoga for 15. There's a lot of knowledge literally just dipping into in the last hour or so. Before we depart, where can listeners find you? Where can people find you? How accessible you are? You travel quite a bit. There might be even an interest of seminars and so on. Where are you at?
Yep. The best place is Budo Jake on Instagram. Of course, you want to visit my businesses, nogi.com and budovideos.com. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on Instagram. I'm happy to answer anything there.
Absolutely.
And guys, it's been great being on your show. You guys are great hosts. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks. Absolutely. If you're ever in Chicago, I always say this, if you're ever in Chicago area, please stay in touch. Make sure you let me know. I would love to have you in my academy. And then, I would love to learn more of the wisdom that you have and you have collected over the years. Why are you laughing?
I want him I want you to do yoga with him. I want you to see and feel what it's like. That's what I want.
This is what I have put up every single day.
Next time I'm in Chicago, I'll definitely let you know. And you won't get away without not doing yoga.
Oh, beautiful, there you go. Everything turned around again.
Can you do some acro yoga with him? I want to see that.
That's what we're doing for sure.
Yes. Beautiful.
Phenomenal. I can't wait. Jake, thanks for being here and take care of yourself.
Peace.
All right. Thanks a lot, Thomas. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.